Growing up, my family felt more like a war zone than a sanctuary. The constant tension stemmed from an unspoken but glaringly obvious dynamic. My younger brother James was the golden child, basking in a glow of praise and affection, while I, the older son, was left to fend for myself in the shadows of neglect. It wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It was a relentless pattern that chipped away at me day after day. My parents' favoritism wasn't subtle. James could do no wrong in their eyes, his every achievement magnified, his every misstep excused, while I was held to an impossible standard, my efforts overlooked or dismissed. The disparity carved deep wounds into my self-esteem, leaving me to question my worth in a home where I should have felt safe. That all changed briefly one Christmas when I was handed a Nintendo Switch. It wasn't just a gift, it was a lifeline. After years of being sidelined, that sleek little console felt like a rare acknowledgement of my existence. A spark of joy I hadn't realized I'd been starved of. I remember tearing open the wrapping paper, my heart pounding with excitement as I imagined hours of escape into games like Zelda or Mario. For once, I wasn't invisible. I cradled that Switch like it was a fragile piece of hope, a chance to carve out a space for myself amidst the chaos of our family. But James couldn't stand it. He'd always been the center of attention, and my happiness, however small, threatened that. I noticed the way his eyes narrowed when I powered on the Switch for the first time, the way his usual smug grin faltered. A few days later, I came home to find his own console, a more expensive model naturally, smashed on the living room floor. The screen was cracked, the controllers mangled, and before I could process what had happened, James was sobbing to our parents, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He did it," he wailed, his voice thick with crocodile tears. "He was jealous and broke it." I stood there, stunned, my mouth dry as I tried to defend myself. I didn't touch it. Why would I ruin his stuff? But my words fell on deaf ears. My parents didn't even pause to consider my side. My father's face hardened, his voice booming as he grounded me for a month, and my mother just shook her head, muttering about how disappointed she was. The Switch, my one sliver of joy, was confiscated as punishment, locked away in their room. James smirked behind their backs, and I realized then that he'd orchestrated the whole thing, sacrificing his own console just to watch me suffer. The betrayal stung worse than the punishment itself, a cruel reminder of how little I mattered in their eyes. That incident festered inside me, joining years of pent-up resentment. The daily slights piled up. James getting new clothes while I wore hand-me-downs, James being praised for a B+ while my straight A's went unnoticed, James getting a pat on the back for chores I'd been forced to do alone. It wasn't just favoritism, it was a systematic erasure of me. And then came the night everything boiled over. It started with something small, James bragging about how Mom had bought him a new phone, just because, while I'd been saving for months to replace my cracked one. He flaunted it in my face, scrolling through apps with a taunting grin. "Maybe if you weren't so boring they'd get you stuff too," he sneered. Something snapped. Years of hurt and frustration surged up, and before I knew it, I was yelling back, my voice raw with everything I'd swallowed for so long. "You think you're better than me because they love you more? You're nothing without their handouts." The argument escalated fast. He shoved me, I shoved back, and suddenly we were screaming over each other, old wounds ripping open. In that moment, all I could see was every time he'd gotten away with hurting me, every time my parents had chosen him. My hands were around his throat before I even registered what I was doing, my fingers tightening as tears blurred my vision. "You don't get to ruin me anymore," I choked out, my voice shaking with rage and pain. He clawed at my arms, gasping, and for a split second I didn't care. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of what I'd endured. I let go when I saw the fear in his eyes, stumbling back as reality crashed in. He coughed and sputtered, running to our parents, and I knew what was coming. When I walked through the door later that night, the air was thick with accusation. My father's face was red with fury, my mother's eyes brimming with tears as James recounted his version, leaving out his provocation, of course. "He tried to kill me," he sobbed, clutching his neck for dramatic effect. I didn't bother defending myself this time. What was the point? They'd already made up their minds. But something unexpected happened. My uncle, who'd been visiting that week, had overheard the whole fight. Not just the end but the lead-up, the years of context spilling out in our shouts. He pulled me aside later, his voice calm but firm. "I've seen how they treat you, kid. This isn't your fault. It's theirs. You don't have to stay here." He offered me a way out, a room in his house an hour away, a fresh start. Then he turned to my parents, his tone sharp. "You've let this go on too long. James needs structure, not coddling. Send him to boarding school. Let him learn some accountability for once." The suggestion hit like a bomb. My parents balked, my mother especially, clutching James like he was a fragile doll. But my uncle didn't back down. "You've raised one son to think he's untouchable and left the other to rot. Fix it or you'll lose them both." For the first time I saw cracks in their certainty. A family meeting followed, a tense, awkward affair in our rarely used dining room. My father, his voice low and halting, admitted he'd failed me. "I didn't see how bad it was," he said, staring at the table. "I should have been better." The words hung there, heavy and overdue, and I didn't know whether to feel relief or anger that it took this to make him see. My mother, though, couldn't face it. She deflected, insisting she'd done her best, that I was too sensitive and James was just a kid. My uncle and aunt called her out, their voices cutting through her excuses, but she doubled down, her denial almost pitiful. I watched her unravel, clinging to a version of herself that didn't match reality, and I felt a strange mix of pity and detachment. Living with my uncle was like breathing for the first time in years. His house was quiet, steady, no favoritism, no chaos. He helped me with school, listened when I talked, and pushed me to chase what I wanted. I dove into coding, something I'd always loved but never had the space to explore, and started building little games. Ironic, given how this all started with a switch. Meanwhile, James went to boarding school, and from what I heard, he struggled at first without mom and dad to bail him out. My parents called sometimes, their voices softer, tinged with regret. Dad especially seemed to be rethinking everything, though mom still hedged, caught between guilt and pride. As graduation loomed, I faced a fork in the road. My uncle sat me down one night, his eyes steady. "You can stay here as long as you want, college, whatever's next, I've got your back. Or you can go home if you're ready. It's your call." The idea of returning to that house, with its echoes of pain and uneven love, made my chest tighten. But staying with my uncle, who'd become my rock, felt like a foundation I could build on. I hadn't decided yet, but I knew one thing. Whatever path I chose, it'd be mine. Not dictated by a family that had broken me, but shaped by the strength I'd found to heal. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a chance.